Hi everyone, welcome back to part 2 for Otis. Let me just change my camera angle here and let's talk about this little component we made in part 1. So in part 1 we measured for our square or a rectangle stone, cabochon, and we learned how to create this frame and capture the stone. And then in part 2 what we're going to do is take these wires and create some side designs here. So anyway, let's talk about this component and how you can use it. When I was asked for this, the young lady needed a center component that she could, then go either onto more cabochons wrapped in similar style, or beads, or chain, right? So I designed this. But what you could also do is not only for the wrist, you can do this, for a necklace as well. Have this be the centerpiece with the design wires here, and then have ribbon, chain beads that come off of here and around the neck, choker style, or you could have it even go long style, right? You could also turn the component this way and do the very same thing. Go into a longer style necklace and dangle some cutie bead tassels off of this side, right? Make these loops bigger or smaller depending on what you need. For instance, what if I decided I wanted a watch face in here? I could get a nice rectangle, a little square watch face, and watch face probably be just like this. And then I could set it in this setting with my curls and designs here to each side, and I could literally have my watch face here with beads, or I could even weave bands of wire and turn this into a lovely watch component or a hanging watch component, a necklace, right? So there's a lot to do with this, and it's worth learning to do, I think, especially for square and rectangle stones. So anyway, before we continue with design then, we're all right here if you guys built this with me the other day. And before we take any bends to these wires, the first thing you want to make sure of is that you have enough coverage on the back here. The wires are still straight, so if we need to pull these tabs in a little further, if your stone doesn't feel secure or the tab doesn't feel like it's going to hold it and it feels like it can, separate and let the stone out, then make them deeper. You have probably 2 inches here, so you could take them down another 3 or 4 millimeter so that they're more inside if your stone's a little bigger, or you just feel a little insecure about it. Same for the front here. I took the old frame apart so that I could show you what these 2 little tabs in front are going to eventually look like. We're going to harden them up, not quite into a prong, but kind of tighter than they were. I don't know if you can see them, so I'll show you. These guys here are soft sea waves. You can leave them as they are, or you can do like me, and we're going to just pretty much, they're going to stay the way they are, but I'm going to tighten them up and squeeze them down a little closer to themselves to make them a little bit smaller. Either way, it'll be beautiful. It'll either be just that you have some wider coverage here, or you can have some smaller coverage here if your stone is smaller. If your stone is bigger, and when we squish these down, you don't feel like it's going to keep the front of the stone in, then leave them spread out as they are, right? So that you have more coverage. It's decorative coverage, it's beautiful, but this bigger reach will hold more of the stone in. If these are not here, the stone pops out. So if we shrink them up to the point where they don't hold the soft shoulder of your stone in, then it won't be stable. So you leave yours a little bit larger if you need to. Okay? And I probably, may or may not shrink them down too much more. And then also with these wires here, remember that you have extra support going on in these wires in addition to design. When we bring them down and curly them up, they're just going to be right here. So we take the ends and, kind of do some curl work there. But if you needed more on the body or more on the back, you could do your own twist to these things and drop some more support here to the back, or drop some more design here to the face of your stone, whichever you prefer, either for the security of the stone or just cause, right? Just because you can. All right, so I have one side taped up still, and I'm going to leave it that way so that I can work with the wires over here. And the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two front wires. They should all be stacked, 3 by 3. Let me change my camera focus so you can get a little closer here. I'm going to take these two very front wires, just identify them and kind of get them out to the side here a little bit. Okay, and I'm just going to bring them down to horizontal in a nice little, they're going to curve over and just do a little curl like that, so we're going to cut a lot of them. So when I make this little turn, I'm just going to bring it like a U shape straight down, and then same here, I want to make the arc of this one similar to that one, and I'll just turn it into a U shape, upside down U shape, and bring it straight down the side of the stone, just like this one. That's pretty good there. These are the two shortest ones, so you don't want them too big because you got wires, for design in the back of them. And so I try to kind of push them here in the shoulders a little bit. Don't get caught up on your front design there. And get them, get them down. It's probably about 4 millimeter, maybe 5. Kind of almost make them into a little heart that touches right there. Okay, just like that. And then we can go and snip the excess. Careful not to snip any other part of your design. Just right about here, this entire length is a little bit more than a half an inch. Yeah, a little bit more than half an inch, but probably not quite 3/4 of an inch. So you're just going to eyeball it. Better to go a little longer than a little shorter because you can always trim back. Try to get them even. Try not to cut any other wire on your design. Okay? You can turn it upside down. It's sometimes a little bit easier to make the little spiral. And I've got my round nose plier. I'm just going to put the very tip of my round nose right there. Very carefully put your finger here on the wire just to hold your little curve. Look at what you're doing when you're doing it. I'm going to turn this way so you can see in the camera. If you're upside down, you can see it better, but you can't see my camera here. Okay, so turn in to that little space, just real carefully, just like that, and make a cute little spiral. And then do the same with this side. Grab the tip of that wire, hold on to your curve down here, and just give a very deliberate turn, not a pull, not a push. Turn your plier and get your curve. This one's a little bit longer than that one, so I'll just work this one a little shorter. If if the wires start to curve on you and you can't get a good perspective on it, get your flat nose and straighten it out. What I always do is try to make these little inside ends end in the same place. That's kind of my eyeball marker. I'm going to trim this one slightly shorter because it was slightly longer. Get my round nose plier, hold the curve, and turn a little tighter. And that's pretty good. Just work them until they're fairly similar like that. Okay? If you can push them down a little bit, don't push them down so far that they're not pretty, but just push them down a little bit closer to the frame. This is the inside wire. It's easier to get them tighter down once they're curled up, just like that. And now if I have some munchie on the tips like I do, I have a very fine cutter, and I'm going to go in there and I'm just going to snip the breadth of that munchie tip out. Okay? turn your cutter so that the flush side is cutting in the right direction. And take just, the teeniest cut, and I couldn't get it cleanly. Sometimes you can make it worse if you can't get it clean, so try from the back side too. So that's pretty clean. And I don't have to sand those little tiny little places now because I just made a clean snip. All right, we don't go to this side until we do the whole thing over here since we have it nice and taped. So now we're going to drop the next 2 wires. These 2 in the center are longer, so you have the opportunity for much more design. You could take it out further if your stone is a rectangle, right, and you need more coming this way. So you have these 2 middle ones, and I'm just going to try to echo these curves and just try to make a U shape coming to the front just above, I'm sorry, going to the back. Well, if you wanted these designs to the front, you could do it either way, really, but in this one, we're going to do it to the back. And I'm just basically making the same thing, a U shape downward, right? It's better perspective if you can look in the front, but just make your wire follow the stone down. And then use your finger up here and just kind of help it down a little bit. Just get it about like that. You don't want it too big. If you need it to go lower, bend it out some and bend it in some and pull down slightly. Okay, about like that. Just a little something there. You know, slant it more towards the shoulder even if you want to. And then this one, try to make it similar. Get a bend on it. If you're working square wire, keep your flat sides looking at you. Come around to the back of the pendant, stay straight down, and just work that wire down. Again, the perspective is better if you're in front. So use your finger up here, push gently. If it doesn't want to go, just do an outie and an innie real quick, and that'll help you adjust it up or down. Okay, just make them similar. Keep them nice and flat up against the other 2, just like that. Okay, really nice. That's about even. They don't have to be perfect. You don't have to worry. It's going to be beautiful. Okay, so now we'll come to the back of them, these wires. And we're going to take these 2 long ones and we're going to create an inward slant. So now that I have the focus of our focus before were these curves, and now our focus is going to be this slant. So almost like a heart, just kind of follow that pull. And watch that you don't change your cutie curve up here. Okay, so a nice slant like that. And then it's a hard measure, but it's about, if you can eyeball about 5 millimeter, we're going to turn this wire back up. Right, so I always usually just try to get it at the end of that inside tab. And I'm going to use my flat nose and get a nice grip, you know, right there where I want to turn it. I'm going to go this way so that you can see it, but it'll be easier for you to do it the other direction. So you want to turn it right here, about 5 millimeter. Don't change your curve. Make sure you're always protecting that. Put your thumb and finger on it so you're not pulling it out of shape. And don't pull, don't push. Just make a deliberate bend on that wire. Okay? Come back up here. If this gets out of sharpness, you can just tap that little corner. You can hold it right there too, actually. It might be easier for you to hold that and then push this wire back up to the corner so that it's kind of, you know, wants to go right out the corner here. Okay, just like that. We'll tighten that up. And certainly you're working down here on your cry cut board, so it'll be easier for you to take your plier. Let me change the focus and see if I can just get this down to you here. Yeah, so it's a little bit fuzzy, but you can see you'd be down here. Your wire would have been straight, and then you can grip it right here, hold your curve, and then just make that turn so that your wire shoots out the corner. Okay? Do this one the same way. First, get a nice elegant slope on it. Hold your loop, you know, the curve that you love, and then just slope this like a heart. Point it to this corner. I don't say corners because your stone might not be the same as mine, so you're just looking to pretend like you were trying to make a nice heart right there. Okay, and then right here, about 5 millimeter, doesn't have to be exactly the same because this is the back side. If it's on the front side, you know, work a little more to get it the same, and still work a little more to get it the same on the back. Try to show you up here. You just want to kind of grip right here. Start the bend out. Don't change your curve or the angle there. And then again, you'd be down here, so you could hold on to your curve, hold on to your frame, get your plier right there, and just turn your arm, turn the plier, so that this comes straight out the shoulder. Okay? You'll look at both sides and kind of make sure they're similar. Look at the front and make sure it didn't change your curves here and here. If it did, just jiggle them back into place a little bit. It's okay. You know, just work them nice. And the arms are coming out the corners. Okay, so here's where you have some options. In my case here, I'm just going to make a back, you know, I'm going to cut this and make a little curl right here. You could do a full loop, bring the wire over here, and maybe we'll do that instead. And add a little bit to this side, this bare shoulder here. Maybe we'll do that for funsies. Let's do that. Remember what you're doing over here because you'll do exactly the same on this side, right? So right here, if I were going to just make an easy, you know, an easy ending to this, I would snip it right here about 3 or 4 millimeter from that corner, and then I would just make a nice turn right into here. So it just gives you a little back curl. You could also snip it right here and give yourself the curl this way if you wanted more on this shoulder, and that's what I'm talking about doing. We're going to tie it to the frame wire below it eventually, once we get all the wires dropped so that you're not, you know, you can tie them all together. So right about here, once you feel like you're even, and you can always, you know, check the line here. You've got the back of your stone, you've got nice even wires. So you can measure or you can just eyeball the cut, whichever you prefer. I'm going to go ahead and get my cutter and just probably eyeball this cut. I'm going about 4 millimeter off the shoulder. And I'm just going to curl it that way. Okay, to give this little bit a little something more, because I have 2 more wires and I can still give this main side something more even, right? So I'll cut this one before I turn that so I can eyeball evenness. And that's about good. I'm looking at the back of my stone here. If you cut too short and you feel like you needed to go over a little bit more, remember you're not tied in yet, so we can stretch, right? You can still stretch over a little bit. So make sure the front looks nice. Make sure they look similar. And then hold the intersection right here where those two come together. If you don't feel like you can hold it, tie them together first and then take the turn. I'm just going to go ahead and turn it first. So I'll take my round nose plier, come right down here to the edge of this wire. I'm going to hold on to my bend to make sure nothing goes awry. And I'm not going to push, I'm not going to pull. I'm just turning my plier to make a nice, you know, little something. Ooh, I was a little bit short. Give yourself a little more space. If you're a little bit short like I did, it's not really short. You can open this wing up a little bit right here, this little V-bend. I wanted a little bigger loop right there, so I just scooted this over a little bit. Always make sure to check the front. It didn't change anything, and it gave me this little bit right here. You see that? And then when I tie it right here, it won't go anywhere, right? So we can separate, you know, if you needed to move it some more, you can just use your plier and give yourself a little more spread between these, okay? And just get yourself something there that you like. You could hammer it. I'm not going to. And then we can tie it right there, you know, with a bead ball. I think that's probably going to be the cutest thing. We might put a bead ball in there and do a little tie. We'll see. If you don't want it right there, or you think, oh, I cut too short, the other thing you can do is bring it back up to where I was talking about originally. You can, you know, bring the loop back in a little closer, a little more this way, and then you can turn this up, close this gap right here up between them. Just gently. We're not working like, you know, feverishly or anything. Just gently. Make sure everything stays nice and flat. And then what that gives you is just this little bit here at the shoulder, and I like that too. Actually, I like that better than going all the way over here. So I'm going to leave that there. You could hammer that too. I'm not going to hammer today, but you could, and that'd be real cute. And you could choose whether to show actually the curl there or not. If you leave it, you know, just like that, it's cute. But if I wanted to angle it up more, I can still affect, you know, the whole wire and just bring it up more, and so that I can see that little turn. I kind of like it better down here. Just a little softer, just like that. Okay, so now I'm going to work to get this side the same. I'm going to get my loop on it first, my little turn here. So I'll get my round nose plier, and remember that it's turning this way, so you're turning this way, to the right. This one went to the left, this one goes to the right, towards the sides. Doesn't matter. If you mess up, then you do the other one the other way. Or you cut them off. And you still have 2 more wires for design. So take this loop, do a nice turn with it. Try to make them of similar size. And then when you get it the way you like it, take your flats or your chain links or your bent nose, get the angle of this back into a heart, since I just demonstrated with the other side, and just turn that side up till it's in, you know, on the shoulder, similar to the other one. I'm just going to gently squeeze that together a little bit. Okay, now look at it from the front, and what that did is it gave us, you know, 2 cute little wings here. And we'll tie it. You know, these little tiny little details matter sometimes. It doesn't have to be much, and it makes it so nice. I'm going to open this loop back up a little bit. I think I made it a little bit smaller. And then we'll tie all that there, see? Okay? So you want to make sure you're laying down, you know, nice and flat. I'm going to change my camera angle and my camera focus again and get a little closer. So that looks nice. And then you're looking at the whole component. You're saying, oh, that's cute. I have 2 more wires. I could do something in between them. I could tie bead balls in there at the end of the day, right? So cute. So all we did was, you know, we made a heart. We bent the heart in half, cut it off with just enough to make curls that, you know, land on our shoulders. Just like that. All right. And now we've got the last wire to go. If you feel like you don't need it, you know, I would just bend them quietly back here. If you need some more on the back side, you know, make 2 little curls and call it a day. You could bend them straight back and just hide them right here and don't do anything. Just make them nice. You know, or you can take them to the front and do some more. So we'll probably just come over here and try to put a little something something right here. Alright, so here I go. I'm going to just hold my finger right here to make sure my loop is a little bit above this one. Let me change my camera. Okay, so I'll put my finger in the back, bracing right here at the neck. You could put a couple wraps or a bead ball there, it'd be cute. I'm just going to come down. I don't necessarily need it to add a whole lot. I want it to fill that little space right there, so I'm just going to come diagonal to it, like that, and just kind of come U-shape again, straight down the edge of my frame here, so I can get a picture of what that might be. And then I might just snip it and do a little back curl right there. That's it. Be real simple and not too bulky at all. I got space. When I cut it right there and do a little back curl, it'll show right there real cute. So then we'll do this one. So nice little curl. You're looking at the other side to make sure that you stay the same. Nice little bend. Put your finger here. Let the pad of your finger help you. Just make a straight line down the side of your pendant. Stay flat on your pendant so that you get good perspective. And you're looking to see that they're fairly even. They don't need to be perfect. Okay? If you love it like that and you're ready to cut them, I'm just going to lower them a little bit and always looking in the front, because that's where you can get a nice visual on it. And same thing, if you still want something over here, rather than bringing these wires back up here, you have this whole thing, you can bring it here. Let's do that. Why not? That's kind of cute, right? You always try the longer design first, because you can always revert back to the short. If this goes bad, cut it off and go the original way we were talking about. Okay? So let's say we want a little bit more in this corner, and it's always, the same side, because we have all these wires over here that we'll do that side with if you want. You can make this a three-sided situation, put a bail on this one. Okay, so anyway, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So from here, rather than going back up this way, I'm going to cut these wires enough to do a little back curl right here. So probably I'll measure just by the outside edge of the loop, just to give myself enough. Only cut the wire that you want there, and then get the round nose plier, get on the edge of your square or round wire with the tip of your plier. Hold this nice curve you've got. Don't push, don't pull, but turn the plier until you get a nice little loop there. Look to the front. Oh, super cute. Just enough, just like this little loop, to be seen, but not necessarily interfering with too much design. It gives you the opportunity also then, I feel like this is a little bit big. If I wanted to put beads on here, I might actually drop a bead ball in there and then string a line of beads on this one. There would be an opposite one and string a line of beads on that one, or string 3, right? Or just use it for design. If you don't like that, well, let me do the other side so we get a good full look at it. I cut it right here to this side of the loop, so I'll do the same. I'll hold my curve up here with my thumb to protect it from shifting, and I'm going to grab my square wire on the tip, and I'm not going to push or pull. I'm just going to turn a nice little loop into it that's similar to this loop, and I'm going to make it live in a similar place. Look at the whole thing and see if I love that. And I might put bead balls right there, etc. You could use all that. I'm probably not going to keep those there. I'm going to bring it back up to my original design idea. But let's say you set this up for a pendant. You could go this way with it. You could drop beads or dangles, right? And then you could just make this side a bail. And then you could put bead balls all in there, right? Or you could bring the front two wires down into body design and then still have enough to make bail. Whew, this is a good component, right? Okay, so let me cut these back. I'm going to make it a little less, I'm just going to keep it all kind of to this side. So from right here, I'm just going to cut it right here at the corner. That's probably a 1/2 inch all told. I'm just going to make a little curl, just enough to make a little curl that goes right there into that open space we talked about. So I'm going to take my plier, get right on the end of that wire. Make sure you're not pushing or pulling on your loop. Just turn. Don't push, don't pull your loop out of shape like I'm doing now. So you always want to hold it up here. And then just turn a cute, tiny little spiral into that space, that empty space we talked about right there. Just land it right there. If you don't even want that, you could go deeper and just bury it behind. Okay, just keep a little curl behind. So I'll do this one now. I could hammer this, it'd be really cute, right? Come down here, I'm gonna make my cut. I like to leave a lot of room for your imaginations too, because I like to show technique and design, but there's 10,000 things you can do with this component that I designed. But I like to design things so that you always have a lot of room for creative exploration, but then you have a lot of space for recovery in the event that that exploration doesn't work. You can always cut back and trim back and still not ruin or waste the work that you've put into the frame. Okay, so all I did was I cut that one back, turned it into a nice little curl right there. This one looks nicer. I probably like it better, so I'm going to put this one a little lower, and then I'm going to see if I can bring this one down slightly. Just make them the way you like them, and just, it'll be beautiful no matter what you do. There we go. I think I like that a little better. Just a little tighter and closer. Just to fill that little space. I might put a bead ball right there. We'll see. And make sure they're all level here in the back. If your little spirals are turned out, just take your thumb and push them in so that they sit nice and right more to the inside. Okay? And then we'll eventually tie this shoulder, and we'll tie this shoulder. So you're earmarking your, making sure that you have something to tie to, and we can tie right there and it won't be seen from the front. But then the front, so there's, forgiveness for if you're not 100% even. And I always like to look up here and make sure from the top that these layers are also nice and even. Always look, this way onto the top and onto the sides of your pendant to make sure that wires are laying nicely. So that's beautiful. Make that bigger or smaller to your liking. I'm going to move on then. And we'll tie that at the end. So now that all these wires are curled and stable, we can take this side and finish it. We'll take the tape off. Make sure that the neck wraps are settled. Make sure that you give a nice clean tap here and that all your wires are nice and together and the band looks good and settled. Okay, and we're just going to repeat the whole design process. So we'll take this one, the two front ones, and we're just going to turn them into a U shape going straight down the pendant, just like that. Do the same to this side. If you're working square wires, make sure that the face of the square is looking at you. It's okay if it's not. Don't ruin anything. Just work to keep them square. If the points are up, don't worry. It's still going to be pretty. Just like that. Okay. And cut them off right about here and here so that we have a little bit to curl into. It's about a ½ inch, maybe a little bit more, from the neck to the cut here. It's okay if it's a little bit longer, we can always trim back. I'm trying to keep it even with the other side if you can. If not, don't worry. It'll be close enough. Okay, so about like that. And now I'm going to take, I think it's actually even shorter because I only need to go right here. So actually, yeah, I'm looking at the wrong loops. This first one only needs to do this, so it's actually more a ½ inch here. I've cut about 3/4. I don't know what my eyes are seeing here. So take it back to here. Okay, about like that. Take my round nose plier. Hold on to your nice curve for some stability. Use the pad of your finger for a brace. And then just turn nice little, tiny little curls into that space. Hold your loop down here. Take the tip of your plier onto the tip of the wire. Then just gently turn a loop into this space. Make sure they're both laying flat. And then look at them to see if they're fairly even. And they are. That's pretty good. Pretty happy with that. If you munch it up the center at all, you can take your very narrow and sharp cutters and snip it out. And then just settle them a little bit more. Don't push your frame out of shape. You're not pushing down, you're just kind of looking to scooch. You know, just be real careful about settling them a little closer so they look nice. Okay? And now the second layer. You know, again, here you could just take these and do a veil, traditional veil. But here we'll go to a component. So make the curve, take it to the back of your pendant, nice and flush, straight down, and then out and in and pull to get it a little smaller, a little lower. Just make it kind of come to the shoulder there. And now the second center wire, trying to keep it similar to this one. Bring it to the back. That's pretty good. If you don't remember what we did, you go back here and you look at this side. Oh, okay, she made it into a heart. So I've got my two curves up here the way I want them. So I'll just hold that, and I'll just follow the line right there. You know, come this way, point to this corner. Depends on the shape of your stone, what works best. You just want to do a nice, like this, so that we can back bend it and go straight back up here. So right here with my flat nose, I'll put my thumb in there so that I don't change my curve. Take my flat nose, only hold that wire. Don't push, don't pull. Just make a turn. And start to bend the wire, kind of, I call it back bending on itself. Kind of like you're making a prong. Remember that we got to tie off to this one up here, so make sure you have some space. Okay? And then since we know what we're doing with this one, you can tap them together right here. Look to the front, make sure that curl is the way you want it. I need mine to go a little bit smaller, so I'll just push it a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to cut this one with enough to do a little curl on the shoulder there. That little guy. They'll stay in place once we tie it all back. Okay, so I'll go ahead and cut this one, leaving about 5 millimeter, 4 millimeter right there. I went short just now. Oh no, maybe not, because that's right, we're just going here. Leaving just enough for you to make a tiny little shoulder curl here that can be seen. And you don't have to close it all the way either. Just, you know, enough to be seen from the front. Just that little bit. Okay? Make sure that the tip is down. You can hold it here and then take your thumb, push the little tip down if it's poking forward. That's nice. So we'll do the same with this guy then. Get your plier. We've got a nice curve going that way. Put your thumb right there. Grab only that wire and start a total back bend on itself. Look at your arc here and make sure it stays similar. Hold it right here. Get the wire kind of turned up and point it at the corner. Take a snip. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. First, squeeze them together so you get an accurate snip. It would have been accurate anyway. Snip about 4 millimeter, maybe 5, above the frames, just enough so that you can make a little curl. Hold the whole wire here at the intersection and turn your plier only so it gives you a little tiny loop that you can see here at the edge. I probably went a little short on that one, but that's okay. It'll still look all right. Okay, look at your sides, make sure you love them. You know, and we can always cut back and cut back. Make sure you can see your little shoulder works there. And then we'll do this very last one. We're just going to turn it. The very last one just, you know, goes like that right there. So hold the neck wires right here so you get some leverage. We're not going over those first ones too much. Just come straight down. Come straight down. Look into the front. Make sure they're level. Get them fairly even. That looks pretty good. Push them shorter from up here if you want to. But let's do that after we cut them. Let's cut right here, just enough to curl right back into that little space. Again, it's, you know, from here to here, it's probably 3/4 of an inch, depending on how big you want your little loop. You can give yourself, you know, a little more, a little less. Oh, okay. Take the tip and just curl a little loop so that you can put it right there. In that little space right there above the little shoulder pad. Okay, we'll do the same to this side. Cut it just below that first loop and give yourself enough just to curl back into that little spot right there. right above that shoulder pad. That looks pretty good. Push them down a little bit, bring them closer if you need to. You can snip, you know, if one is too long. I think I've got this one a little bit too much. Snip it a little bit, take the insides out if you munched them up. Hammer them if you want to. Just make sure that they lay nice. We're going to tie this loop to the wire underneath it, just 3 or 4 wraps, 3 or 4 wraps. If your neck wraps are, you know, like here my little neck wrap is half round is separating a little bit, get a thin plier, take your time, get in there, and just tap it back into place on both sides. I need a smaller plier than this one, so I'm going to get my chain nose plier, and I'm just going to tap my wraps. I wasn't keeping an eye on my neck when I was working those. Try to keep an eye on the neck of your piece right there. As you pull these down, tap that guy. You know, it goes back into place anyway, but if you're tapping as you go, it's better. Okay. Tap from the back, just make sure those ends are down and that that's all squared off. And that's real pretty. Set your pendant down, settle all these wires. Know your stone, don't push too hard, but settle this frame. And now here at these two, I'm going to make them a little smaller. So right here, I'm going to reinsert my round nose plier. If you don't feel like you can do this without hurting your stone, get a little piece of paper or tape underneath there. A little piece of paper works. And all we're going to do, this, we're in design now, so you can't push, pull, or otherwise. All we're going to do is just make it a little tighter, so just go straight, you know, into its own turn. That's it. You'll just get back into those two joints and keep turning as if you're just trying to tighten it back up. Just like that, make it a little smaller is all. You're looking at both sides. Make sure that that doesn't take you off of the soft shoulder of the stone. You know, it cinches it up a little bit, cleans it up a little bit, but still gives you plenty of hold. If your stone is deeper and the belly protrudes more, you might keep them longer, right? It doesn't hurt to do that. It's pretty in both ways. So right here, I'm doing this because mine's kind of small. Just turn into a tighter little bit. You know, I'm kind of looking to make that lazy S more of a sharp S. So you just get right back into the corners with your plier. Don't do anything until you know that your pliers are in there right. And then just continue that turn. Take it more, you know, inside and closer. Okay, and there's your component. All right, you guys, let's go to the next thing. I hope you are liking this so far. Check the back here while we shifted a bunch of wires. You know, do a little squeeze, just make sure that everything's laying nice and that these little corners are nice and flat. And showing a little bit. And look to the front, make sure that your adjustments, that you like them. So then put your pendant down, gently settle the wires by pushing all these sides. Okay, and that should give you a nice capture on your stone. It gives you a nice component that you can actually work with in, you know, more than one direction, right? And then we'll just tie the back up next. All right, so before we tie everything down, I like to really check my design out to make sure it's what I want. If I want to make any changes, now's the time to do it before I start the work of, getting all these little bits secured together. So for instance, looking at this, I feel like there might be, if I want this to be a bracelet, all this might be a little too much, or just I made it bigger than I thought I wanted it. So I think I'm going to alter some things, but I'm just going to play with these elements so that you get some ideas about what you can do. If I felt like that stuff was a little bit tight, I could take these end wires and, being very careful not to mangle them, I could just spread them out a little bit instead of making them all clustered up like that. You don't want to lose your beautiful curves or anything that you did here, but rather than, making all behind each other, I could just alter it a little bit, open it back up, make it reach, or maybe if you're watching this ahead, you just decide, oh, I'm gonna do it this way instead and make it bigger rather than tighter. So let's just say I wanted more open space there. Yeah, I could do like that, and that's pretty as well. Alter this side to make it similar, just raising these a little bit. And that's the beauty of when you don't tie things together right away or as you go. It depends on the design. I mean, this one allows us to do this. We don't need them tied together as we go. So I can make design decisions afterwards. See, now if I hammered those, that'd be pretty neat. Get it a little lower. Raise these shoulders a little higher to meet it, to give me a place to tie into if I need to, or tie bead balls between if I need to. Just work carefully so that, don't make any drastic moves. And always check up here to see that you're level so that you have good perspective on what you're doing. If the wires are off from each other, then one looks shorter than the other one, and they might not be. Okay? So make sure that I'm level so that I'm seeing distances correctly. Okay, so that's one idea. I could just go bigger there, and see, that for me feels like it might be better than this. Or, if I were going to do a pendant and have it go this way, then they don't have to be the same. If I hammered these out, put little bead balls right there and right there to tie all those intersections together, and then made this kind of a little more pointy style, or with the intention to take a chain up here, I could take these back wires, and again, working carefully, patiently, and with the proper pliers so that we're not making big drastic moves. I can alter these two wires, right? So let's say I just want this to be more narrow. Take them way up here so this one's a little more flush. I could take these, put a few more wraps. I could have half round 2 or 3 more wraps right there to raise these wires. Take your flats, and this way you don't keep mangling the end of your little bit. You've got the first loop turned, so you just go to flats, then take it on the corners and roll. Let go, take it on the corner and roll, let go, and etc. So then you could just do this to your liking. Make sure that they go behind or in front, whichever. That's kind of neat too. I like that. I think a little bit better. That helps you work those in there without your round nose getting too involved. Okay, so you could change design like that, and that gives you a pendant that maybe, you wear this way. You put a jump ring and a chain, tie things together, because that little loop isn't enough to hold, but you get the idea of what you can do. Make sure that you're checking your levels and layers and that they're even, so you've got nice perspective. Okay, and then you can hammer all that. If you don't want to use these and you say, okay, I'm done with, I'm not going to do the sideways bracelet component, I want this as a pendant upright, then you take these and bend them back is one option. So I'm going to do some alteration with it. If I decide I don't want it, but I'm insecure about cutting it, you can just take your flat nose, make sure that your frame stays on the stone and level, and bend it straight back. So hold your corners. You're not pushing, you're not pulling, you're making a very deliberate bend to the back. When you've got it sloped, hold on to, make sure your frame is on your stone, and then push straight back. You have a little riser that you can, it lifts a little bit, so you could put a wire through here, right? A big wire, and do like a bracelet or something else kind of design. If your stone had a little pointed facet back there, this might help keep the valley up, or one way to do it. Ooh, that's a little off, it's bugging me. If you have nothing and you just want to get rid of it, then you make a nice deliberate bend over the corner. So once you get it bent back this way, it gets really tight. So then from here I would go to a metal plier and make a very deliberate bend so that it lays, and be on your wire, not on your stone, with your plier, and complete the bend. And then that way you can just get rid of that wire, but you haven't changed the integrity of the frame there by cutting anything. Just make sure you don't pull your sides off. Or again, if you felt like you needed more, we could have bent it in the other direction and just had it be a little extra support loop right here if it didn't interfere with design, right? If it bulges, take it to your cry-cut board and press very gently, or take your nylon jaw at its soft edge here and just make sure you're gently working this edge back to nice and square. Okay, so it would be almost invisible if you did it that way. Okay, I'm going to bend it back out. I know, you guys are probably freaking out, but better on me than on your own piece, right? So I'm just going to take it and pull it back out just for sakes. And squeeze right there and put it back together. Ooh. Make sure I'm square. You can only do this a couple of times before your wire gets brittle. So don't think you can keep smashing it up like this. Okay, so that's one way you can get rid of those loops, or like I said, if you went to the front, whew, it could give you a little extra support in the front if you needed it. Take it right there and right there, get it slanted in the direction that you want, get it on a nice, flat and hardy surface like this, or like your nylon jaw, and just lay it down onto your piece. I think that looks better than taking it to the back I like that a lot better. And then you have a little space. You could tie a bead ball even if you want to. Do some design there. So that's if you get all the way over here to this place with all of this wrap and you decide you don't want to go sideways. So you can go like that. You can take chain to here. You can make these two sides, you know, looks more similar. Just trying to remember what I did on the other side. And if you make your curls tight like that, sometimes you don't actually even need to tie them off because they're pretty sturdy like that. Okay, and now, you know, I could go this way for a lovely pendant component. And I've got the extra security of this little bit right here. Just make sure you make it square on the bottom there. Or I could have left it there to dangle some prettiness off of, right? So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I'm going to show us how to do some jump rings. We'll tie all this next, and then that'll be your piece. All right, so at the last minute, I might decide to drop this back down and add some kind of cute dangle on there. I'm not sure yet. But I've got a bunch of 1 and 2 millimeter copper beads here that I'm going to start to tie the frame together with and onto. So I'll get some 26 gauge. I like 26 gauge because it's thin, but it's pretty sturdy. Doesn't break as easily or quickly on beads as 28 might. But 28 works good too, even 22 gauge half, just for some texture. So I just pulled a random foot here of 26 gauge, and I'll work with 6 inches at a time. I'll look here to the back. I know that I need to tie these intersections right here. I don't necessarily need to tie those. I could do it by one bead ball up there. So I'll go ahead and just start with the utility tying, which is right here. If you can slip, you know, underneath those right there, do that. I like to pull out about an inch so I can hang on to it. And then just take this half, do 2 or 3 or 4 wraps. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get underneath there, so you can push a little bit of a gap between the stone and the wire. Help yourself out. It's just like sewing. Doesn't need much. You just want 2 or 3 little wraps on that. So again, we're at the back here. I'm making a couple of little wraps. You know, make it pretty, because if this were a reversible stone, it's pretty on both sides. Okay, so I've got 3 wraps right there to hold that arm onto the frame in the position I want it to be in. I might do one more. Remember, sometimes you might have to give a little bit of gap between the stone and the wire if you need to separate them a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead, since it's thicker and I'm using 26, I am just going to cut it right here. I'll use fresh wire on this side. I'm going to use my very fine plier, turn this little end under. If you're using half round or anything, it will work the same way. Tap that little end down. Just make it nice and neat, and all your ends should be underneath there. Okay, come back to this side, make sure your shoulder is still here, and it is. Okay, so I've got my one tie. I'll go ahead and do that to this corner, to this corner, and to this corner. So I got 2 of them done. I'm tying my third one up. Make sure that my little shoulder can be seen. So I'll just raise this a little bit if I need to. So these two are nice and showing. They're sewed in. This one is sewn and it's nice and showing. So I'll do this last one. My last little bit of 26 gauge that I pulled. Just give a little curl at the end here if you need to. It helps you sometimes to get underneath there. Hold on to an inch of it and then take the other couple of inches. You work with what you want. This really only takes a couple of inches to do, but it's hard to hold on to, so I give myself 4 inches of wire at each of these corners. Cut it off, turn it under, tuck it, underneath. Okay, and that's pretty good. Remember, always keep tapping your neck here to make sure that those wraps stay put as you work. And then check to see that your little shoulder pieces are showing. If they're not, you can just use your plier to help you raise them a little bit. So I got all 4 of them cute in the corner there. I intend for mine to go this way. I'm going to make it a pendant. I'm going to put a jump ring and a jump ring. That's what I decided to do instead of like a bracelet. But if I wanted to do a bracelet, I would go this way. You could go beads and beads, or I would turn those back and you could go this way. Go, you know, you'd have to tie these to make sure that the connection stays, or hook in here and here. Beads, beads, and maybe even one in the middle beads, right? And then these, you wouldn't even have to have them here. You just fold them up. Or you fold them halfway and dangle a little, just a charm or 2 off of them. And that could be real pretty too. But again, we're going up, I'm taking this one into a pendant. So all 4 sides are sewn right there. So my corners are good. And settle the pendant always. Put it back down on here and just tap, tap with your hands. Make sure your wires are settled. Decide if you want any more decorative beads anywhere. I'm going to go ahead and put a tiny little 2mm, I think. These might be 2mm right there. I think that's pretty cute. Maybe it should be a bigger one. Huh. Maybe a little bigger one. Yeah, I might do that. So I'll just use either 28 or 26 gauge, whatever you prefer. I think this one is 26 that I've got. Yeah, 26 gauge that I have in my hand. And I'm going to go ahead and use a bigger bead ball here. I'll use this copper. I think this is 3mm. I'll get it sewn through here. Pick my frame up. And right here, between all these wires, my two back loops are open, right? So I can just literally use this wire, tie the ball on, and then, tie these two up a little bit more right there too. So I'll just slip to the back here, make sure there's no slack on either side of the bead ball. Hold the one short one and get a nice pull on the other one. Now, you can wrap to these two frames right here, this one to this side and this one to this side. Ooh. Just make sure that you don't have slack in your little wires. So anyway, I'll just thread it like that. I've got a hold on my bead. I'm going to go ahead and just make 2 or 3 wraps right here. Make sure that these wraps are down here and close to the bead. Make sure to look in front. See that you like that it's sitting properly, and it is. Before you cut anything, I might go one more time, make it 3, like 3. Make sure that the bead is facing forward evenly, and then make 3 wraps over here. Don't push, don't pull too much, just work gently so that you don't pull your design elements out of shape. Use my plier. I'm just going to push these wraps a little closer to the bead ball there. I'll take this one. I made 3, so I'm going to cut it off at the back. I'm going to pass it through here. So I've got 3 wraps. I think I like that. 3. Pass these to the back, cut them off, and then do the opposite side. If you feel like you need, to tie more together here, don't cut those off. You can use those, and tie if you needed to tie there, or for instance anywhere else. Or you can cut them off and then just use fresh wire. So in here, I'm going to cut these as close as I can to the bottom inside, and then I'll just make sure to tap that cut end so that I don't feel anything. I don't see anything. This one, I can see it. I'm in the camera too, so. But you would be right on top. Try to cut it more to the inside here, so the inside of this little edge, back edge, so that when you look at it, you don't see it. That's pretty cute. That's pretty cute. Alright, so I changed my mind again, and I'm going to bend this back out. And I am going to use it as maybe a pendant form this way. Chain, and then I'll dangle some little bits off of there. Little football bead that I have that I love so much will probably work great in that space. I might go for a football bead right there, you guys. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Okay, I like that. And then it reduces that loop. You can make these loops smaller. You can make 2 loops, I think I probably made these loops a little bigger than I needed to, but you can always disguise the space by tying a little bead ball in there and then putting your connectors, beyond it. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm staying with 26 gauge wire. Just going to put my little football bead in the middle. Get it lined up right there. This is a 3, it's probably 4 millimeter actually. This is a 4 millimeter. This is a 4 millimeter. I call them football beads. They look like a little football. And I'm just going to tie it in here so it reduces the space of this hole but gives me still enough room to put a couple of jump rings so that I can do beads or do chain or do whatever you want to do. If you need to still reduce it further or just for decoration, you could coil all the way around. I might do that. I tie this side on. I like to tap it all right there. Push them all close together. That's cute. And now I can dangle things off that bottom loop. I could still make this into a pendant. I might go that way with it and just dangle little bits there. But you know, it's cuter now if you do beads or chain out this way. You know, that hole doesn't have to be so big. So if you made it as big as I did and it's too much, then you can reduce the size. You know, I'm just trying to give you guys lots of ideas here about this square rectangle square rectangle connector component. So I'll just do it that way. I think I'm just going to go ahead and wrap all the way through to the other side. Okay, just like that. I'm going to take it to the back. Make sure it's nice and clean cuts or breaks back there. And then you have this. That's cute. Tap those right there. The bead's a little bigger than the space, but that's okay. You get the idea. Ooh, broke my fingernail for real. Okay. Then I always like to lay it back down, tap everything, make sure to settle these sides. Okay, so we'll make this cute little bead dangle off the bottom of the pendant here. And to do this, I'm using 3 inches of 20 gauge round wire. You could use square as well. You could use 22 gauge, a little smaller if you wanted. The bead ball is 4 millimeter. Yeah, that's a 4 millimeter bead right there. It might be 5 millimeter. This is a 5 millimeter bead. My bead ball is 5 millimeter, and the one down here is 2 millimeter. So I start with the 4 inches of 20 gauge wire, and I'm going to take the very tiny end of it. I'm going to use my chain nose plier, take the very end of it, and just turn it over on itself. My beads have very large holes, so I know it'll take this 20 gauge wire. If your bead holes are a little bit smaller, you might want to consider a smaller wire to make your pin, or you can just use a head pin instead of making your own head pin. These are called head pins. They might be called eye pins as well. You can use either. So I've made a little catch at the bottom since I'm making my own head pins. And I'm going to start by catching my first smaller bead. I'll just drop that onto there and let it fall down here. And make sure that it just sits nice and that it looks cute. Don't make that loop too big. You know, just kind of tap it and make it a little stop for the bead. And then I'll string my larger 5mm bead on here. I shouldn't say string, I should say insert. So I get the little dangle, right? And then to make the loop, I'm going to take my round nose plier. This loop has to be big enough to get around this space. So if you coiled it, you know, you might need to make a little bigger loop than if you hadn't coiled it, but just make sure you've got an eyeball on the loop size that you need. That's about right here on my plier, about 3mm. So I'm just going to hold my bead stick, let the beads settle to the bottom here, and I've got my plier in a horizontal position. I'm going to hold the beads, and I'm going to turn this plier 90 degrees so that the wire is facing me. It's a 90-degree bend. And then I'm going to take my thumb, I haven't let go of the plier, and I'm going to push this wire straight up, straight over, and back down. Straight over the plier head, so the plier head makes your loop, comes right back down the beads. Now let go of the bottom tooth gently and just rotate your plier so that you can get the tooth out of your way and grip up here so that you can close this loop. And again, make sure this loop is big enough. I'm just making mine a little bigger by tapping around and scooching it down. Make sure it's big enough that you can go into that space. Before you close it, let me snap this one off so you can see how to get in there. Just going to cut this one off. So to get your bead charm on there, you make your loop but keep it open. Make sure it's big enough. I'm using 20 gauge wire. I could probably just leave an open loop, but I'm going to show you how to close it in case you are using thinner wire. So we want to make sure there's a little gap right here so that you can pass through. So you make the loop and then open it up slightly, you know, right there, see? So that you can insert the wire and catch that space. Now you can close this loop. So I'm in there, I'm going to bring the wire back together. It's a tight hold, but if you can get a fine plier, either your chain nose or your very fine bent nose, hold it right here at the base of that. Let your beads settle down and then take a 360-degree turn once or twice around that little gap in the neck. Very tight if you can do it. So I like to dangle my pendant upside down. I use my bent nose pliers in this way, so gravity helps me get the big pendant out of my way. And then I can just take this wire. You know, there's a little bit of slack. There's about 1mm, so you should be able to wrap the neck once and maybe even twice. Get a nice, clean, pretty wrap. And then snip it off as close as you can possibly get it, right there. Then you can take your plier, your fine plier, either your bents or your chain nose, and tap around, tap that cut down and into place. And then you have a cute little bead dangle. Make sure that the neck is sitting straight up and down, so you can just, you know, take your plier and make sure it's hanging nice. I did mine a little bit backwards. You see that cut? Don't let that cut face you in front. I should have turned it another half a turn and cut it in the back. I wasn't paying attention to where my cut was. what direction I was facing. So the little end of the cut here, you know, this is the front of the pendant, so turn it back here, take the cut. That little cut doesn't look at you. I'm not going to fix mine. I'm just letting you know. Okay, so that's super cute. If you have some jump rings, you can pull them out. This is pretty decent size. It's not a huge pendant, but it's not tiny. So I'm going to put 20 gauge weighted, I'm going to put 20 gauge jump rings up here for my chain. If you have 20 gauge jump rings, use them if they're pre-made, like these, okay? If you don't have pre-made ones, you can make your own, and I'm going to quickly show you how to do that, just in case. So you'll take, this is 20 gauge round wire, the same wire we used here. I've got just 3 inches of it. And I want my jump rings not necessarily, you know, huge, but enough for me to get a chain or whatever through it, right? So probably, if I don't want to float my chain, I'm going to make my jump rings about 4 millimeter. So I'll just take my 20 gauge and I'll come around my 4 millimeter dowel, or 6 millimeter is a good size. Actually, this is 6. I didn't mean to say 4. Six millimeters probably better for you guys. I didn't get this last pull very good. And you're looking for 2 jump rings. So I go around this thing, you know, 3 or 4 times, because my first turns and my outer turns are never the greatest. So I usually take the 2 center rings out of 4. So now I'm just going to snip all the way across, and I'm going to take the 2 best rings out of the middle. When you do this, I'm going to change my camera focus and give you very close up. When you do this with flush cutters, there's always one side of the ring that has a point on it, and the other side of the ring is flat. You see the point on this side of my ring, and this side of my ring is flat. So you need to get rid of that point, or else this ring won't sit together properly. But you don't want to cut off so much, because then the ring isn't round anymore. So do you see where the point slants right there? At the very top of that slant, and I'm going to try to get even closer. Let's see how she goes. Let me get a second plier out. I'm going to hold it with this one just because I don't want my thumbs all in the camera there. So there's the one side with the slant on it. I'm going to take my very fine plier and I'm going to cut the slant off right there at where the slant starts. And make sure you're on the flush side of your cutter. So you'll come right in there and you'll just barely cut off that 1 millimeter slant. Do you see what I just did? I didn't cut the ring, I cut that slanted tip off. So I have 2 flat sides of a ring. Woo! That's pretty good. You get the idea. Okay, so once you get your 2 jump rings ready and you've trimmed those pointy ends off, you can open them up, get your pendant, loop into your pendant, and then if you're going to fix this pendant to the center point of your chain, you keep that loop open, get the end point of your chain, 1/2 of your chain, insert it, close your jump ring, make sure it lays nice and flat both on the side and flush on top. That's nice. Get your second jump ring, open it up enough to get the pendant through it, into your pendant, and then into the opposite end of your long chain for your necklace. I'm using a short chain as an example. Pretend the chain is 24 inches long or 20 inches or whatever length you want. Put your jump ring back together And then basically you have this pendant on your necklace, right? On the center point of your chain, and it would look a little bit like this. You can then, split the chain in half right here and put your hooks on, right? So once you attach it, you just come find the center link and take it out. And then now you have your pendant on, say, a 20 or 18-inch chain or whatever you want, hanging this way. And your clasp would go onto there, just like that. Okay. If I wanted to put this instead over a line of beads, then what I might do instead of chain right there is, put a very large jump ring that I could float over my beads. So I'll take this chain off real quick so that you see. I could get a giant jump ring or make a giant jump ring and make it a very large diameter and make it a bail ring, right? So it's significantly larger than my pendant because it's intended to be a bail. This is 16 or 18 gauge you could do this with. Make the ring about 8 or 10 millimeter in diameter. And the reason that you're making it that large is so that it can function as a bail to your piece. You can even dangle some cuteness up there if you wanted to. But that way, then you can take your chain and you can float. It's called floating the pendant, which means that it's not fixed at the center point like the last example. It floats back and forth along your chain, just like a traditional necklace. And if you make that ring big enough, then certainly you can get, a line of beads through there, and you can dangle this beautiful pendant, say on a line of beads here. You can wear it this way as well. A cute little necklace component like this on some beads. Okay, so I hope you have 100 ideas at least out of this video, and I hope you've enjoyed the project. I've certainly enjoyed you being here with me, and if you were able to make one or like this video, please remember to give me a thumbs up, hit the notification and the subscription button down here in the bottom right hand side of your screen. Join my channel membership if you want more detailed help from me. But I think that there's a lot you can do with this, and I would love to hear what you think about it. All right, you guys, we'll see you for the next one, and have a great day. Happy creating.